On tonight's programme, how did a car crash save this woman's life? Why couldn't doctors discover what made 400 people collapse? And what stopped a shark from killing its prey?
Welcome to Mysteries. Our first film took place in Australia 15 years ago, when the technology to transplant bone marrow was still in its infancy. Today, of course, it is relatively a much simpler and safer procedure. But in those days, doctors believed that the only possible matching donors could be your brothers or sisters. The problem for Linda Wiltshire was that she didn't have any.
When I first met Linda, she was about 18. She was just starting off in a modelling career. She'd been doing it for a little while. She loved it. She had a great time. Everyone loved her. She was, you know, a beautiful young girl. She was 18, full of life. Life was fun. You know, we had a great time. We were just starting out, looking forward to what was going to be around the corner for us.
Linda was a normal, healthy teenager. I remember she had a minor, small car accident, and she was complaining about a sore throat, a bad cold and a bad headache. It started to worry me, and I took her to the doctor. When the doctor examined Linda, he found a rash all over her body and blood blisters in her mouth, and he was concerned and sent us straight away for a blood test.
Linda was diagnosed with aplastic anemia. Aplastic anemia is a condition in which the bone marrow can't produce red cells, white cells and platelets, and the reason why it can't produce them is because there is no bone marrow tissue left. Now, no person can survive without an adequate number of those three elements. If you don't have platelets, you'll bleed spontaneously without injury. If you don't have white cells, you'll be infected and won't be able to control the infections. And if you don't have red cells, you'll succumb to the anemia.
Linda, we'll give you another transfusion and then we'll see how that goes.
She had red cell transfusions, platelet transfusions, and also she had steroids. And the aim was to keep her going long enough in the hope that her bone marrow would recover spontaneously. There was a very high risk that Linda would die in those early stages of the disease.
Although doctors could treat aplastic anemia by giving a bone marrow transplant, at this time they thought the donor had to be the patient's brother or sister. All they could do for Linda was give her blood transfusions.
She had transfusion after transfusion, and that upsetted her very much, and it upsetted me too.
I used to take Linda to the hospital about 3 times a week for her transfusions and treatment. She was having reactions and she was bruising where they put the needles and that in her, and it was a terrible time for her.
I explained to Linda's family the seriousness of this disease and told them that there was a fair chance that she might not survive it.
After 4 months, she started to get depressed. I started to get depressed. I couldn't bear to see Linda suffer too much, and I couldn't do anything about it. All what I could do was live life day by day. Very, very upsetting, but there was still hope. And as a mother, you always hope.
Even when Linda was really sick, she was still really strong. Her will was strong. She wasn't going to let it beat her. I tried to give her blood to help her. I would have done anything to help her. Often Linda would come home from the hospital after a treatment and she'd be sad or depressed or angry. The treatment would cause mood swings.
Because I'm going out.
Now you're not going out.
Yes, I am. I already told you.
No, you're not.
Yes, I need to get out of the house.
You're supposed to rest, Linda.
One night when Linda was home and she was tired from the treatment, she wanted to go for a drive.
Andrew.
So I went down and I borrowed my dad's car and we went for a drive. We wanted to be alone. We wanted to get away from everyone, away from the hospitals, away from our parents. We just wanted some time to ourselves, you know. So we went to a local park where, you know, all the young people used to knock around through the day. We parked down there and Linda was tired, she was sick, so she went to sleep. And before too long, I think I must have fallen off to sleep as well, you know. Next thing I knew, Linda woke me up. The car was all lit up. There was a massive headlight coming straight from the back of the car. I tried to get the car out of the road, but I didn't have time. I just grabbed hold of Linda and we just hung on tight.
Lynn! Lynn! Lynn!
Then it was like my worst nightmare come true. Linda was laying there. She had blood coming out of her everywhere. I just didn't know what to do. I thought I'd killed her. I thought that was it. I thought, you know, it was all over.
Lynn!
In the dark, Andrew hadn't seen the railway track and they'd been hit by a train. Although Andrew wasn't hurt, Linda was. She arrived at hospital unconscious and bleeding badly.
On the night of Linda's accident, I recall being called in, and at that stage she was severely traumatised with a number of fractured ribs and a large collection of blood in the thorax. I thought there was a real risk that she would not survive the night, because even a normal person with that amount of trauma could be in trouble, but this was a girl with a marked reduction in platelets and white cells.
Yeah, is there nothing else you can tell me? Or
Patient. We're doing what we can. I'll be right back.
They took her in intensive care that night. She looked bad. She looked really bad. I felt like it was my fault. I felt like I just hadn't taken enough care. It was a stupid thing that had happened. I thought she was going to die and I thought I'd caused it, you know. Yeah, I just sat down in the hallway and put my head in my hands. I couldn't believe it was too much.
We were sitting in the hospital and waited and was thinking we will lose our Linda tonight.
But miraculously, she did pull through.
I was in intensive care for about a week while they stabilised my blood. I don't have a lot of memories in there, a few, but I was pretty off with the fairies. After a week in intensive care, I was returned to the ward. Every morning, the blood nurses came around and took our blood. All the platelets and things that they were putting into me were just disappearing. It was pretty normal that I expected them to come back with platelets. And when she arrived back an hour or so later, she said to me,
Linda, we've got the results of your blood test. Your body's made some of its own platelets overnight.
What?
Isn't that great?
I can't believe it.
For the first time in 8 months, I'd actually produced platelets of my own. This was just amazing. I'd had 8 months with no platelets. Nobody could believe this. Myself, my family, the nursing staff, the medical staff, they even came back and took blood from me again just to make sure.
Linda, they're up again. I think you're on your way.
Oh, fantastic.
I felt like I was pretty incredible because the whole 8 months I was wishing I could just make one, and I'd made 10,000 overnight. It was pretty unreal.
Isn't it wonderful, darling? Just wonderful.
Settle down, Mum. I don't know yet.
I couldn't believe it when Linda told me that was the first good news after months and months and months.
These platelets.
Doctors explained to me that sometimes a remission can happen just before your last relapse and your body's just had enough. Often before people die of horrible diseases, their body seems to be working really well, and then all of a sudden it's all over. But eventually my platelets did reach 50,000. We were all very excited. They threw a party for me down in haematology. And that was it then. We were just waiting for it to get higher and higher and higher. Well, what are you going to have next time when you come in? Is it going to be 75? Is it going to be 100? And every time we reached a major number, like 75 and 100, we had another little party. It was great.
After 4 weeks in hospital, Linda was allowed to go home.
When they finally let her out, she was like a spring that had been sprung, you know. She wanted to do everything. She wanted to go everywhere. She talked from the moment she woke up to the moment she went to sleep. And she just wanted everything she'd missed out on and 100 times more, you know. And that's just exactly how I felt as well, too.
Linda made a full recovery from both the accident and the aplastic anemia. But why had she suddenly started to produce platelets?
I think what cured Linda was a train accident. I think her body had a big shock and rallied its last effort to fight off the train accident damage, and she came good.
Her doctor, however, is not so convinced.
I must say that I'm a skeptic about the accident actually being seriously involved in her recovery, but I think Linda's story is remarkable. She was so profoundly ill at first that the mortality is so high, and this girl survived this prolonged illness. I suppose the point is the character of the girl involved, but the fact that she had severe aplastic anemia and survived with just supportive treatment.
I did worry for a long time that it would come back. I was very nervous that I would relapse, but it never did. I never had any trace ever again.
But how else could Linda's recovery be explained?
After the motor vehicle accident, Linda received a fair amount of blood, but she'd received a huge amount of blood transfusion over many years before. I guess there is the possibility that one of those units of blood led in some way to bone marrow recovery. It is possible. It really is quite an amazing event.
Looking back now, after all these years, it's like it happened to somebody else. If it came back now, I don't think I'd be able to fight like I did then. I managed to go away and have my 2 wonderful little girls, and I'm very happy that I became a mother. And I'm very happy that I lived to tell this story.
Our next story happened on the 13th of July 1980 in a mining community in Nottinghamshire. On that day, 414 people were rushed to hospital, suffering from a variety of different problems. But even now, no one can agree on what caused them.
Imagine being surrounded by hundreds of people. For no reason, they start passing out around you.
I've certainly never seen anything like that in my life.
These people are simultaneously affected by extreme and unfounded anxiety.
It was chaos, it was frightening, I just didn't know what was happening.
In the Middle Ages, they called it demonic possession. Today, we call it mass hysteria.
On July the 13th, 1980, people gathered to watch the marching youth bands from the local pit communities compete in the Hollingwell show near Nottingham. But what started off as a beautiful summer's day very quickly turned to chaos. Even now, people who were there believe they've never had a satisfactory explanation for exactly what happened.
We got there fairly early, and it was a red-hot sunny day, which is a bonus. And when the time came, all the rest of the bands had arrived. I think it was 11 bands at the time. And they marched on to the arena, which is a roped-off area.
All the jazz bands were in the field. We have a dressage where they go and the judges go around looking at you, making sure you look smart.
At 10 o'clock that morning, everything changed.
Suddenly, the leader, drum major of our band, fainted.
It was the little ones that started fainting first. I mean, I was only 15 at the time.
Somebody else came running along and saying, wait a minute, you know, we've got another one here. And then suddenly there was another one as well.
There was everybody, you know, all the children, adults, all just fainting.
Could we please have calm? We do have the situation under control.
When we did get there, it was obvious to us that we certainly wouldn't be able to cope with this amount of children. So we very quickly radioed ambulance control and asked for further assistance.
We are cancelling the show. Could you please leave this side?
It was quite frightening at the time. We were all lying down, and then I started feeling sick, so I was lying down with them.
I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Children literally collapsing and fainting, but it was very, very weird, I have to say.
So many people were being taken ill that 4 hospitals were put on emergency, ready to receive them.
By the time we'd actually arrived at the hospital, the 2 adults had collapsed as well. And I was thinking, is it going to be me next? And then when we got to the hospital, they got them out, and suddenly people just kept coming in.
I remember being in a big room, and we all had a mat each. We all had to lie on a mat because there weren't enough beds for us all.
Adults were sitting there, and they were then collapsing within the ward. So it was really, yeah, very frightening.
By the end of the day, 414 people had been taken to hospital. Yet when they were examined, the doctors couldn't find anything wrong with them. Almost all were discharged immediately. The local health authority then launched an immediate inquiry. Its conclusion? There had been an outbreak of mass hysteria.
But could this really explain what had happened?
Now, it normally starts out with a small upsurge of emotions, but it quickly spreads, and from a small scale, one can end up with an entire group of people falling to the ground, very much the same way that it only takes one sheep in a flock to panic, and the next thing one knows, the entire flock is going over a cliff because of the first one. In this particular case, I feel that the tannoy announcements really were very much like a hypnotist planting suggestions in people's minds. First, the ice cream or the sweets were not to be eaten because they're making people ill. Then the band contest is called off.
Please report back to your buses.
Then it's back on again.
The show is not cancelled.
Causing confusion. It's actually gaining a sense of control over people's behavior. And of course, combined with the stress of being in the competition and being desperate to win on a hot day, it's a perfect atmosphere for people to have some very strange responses, including mass hysteria.
It's rubbish. These are sensible people, people that are used to dealing with situations and large numbers of people as well. No, it was never mass hysteria.
So what other explanation could there be?
The children were suffering from vomiting, fainting, sore throats and runny eyes, and the cause still isn't known. But local health officials are looking into the possibility that crop spraying in the area was to blame.
2 weeks earlier, a helicopter had been spraying surrounding the fields.
Imagine 400 young people marching at the same time in a confined area. It disturbed the ground. It was very dry, very hot, and very dusty, and that whatever was in that ground or in the atmosphere affected the young people.
So why hadn't the inquiry come to this conclusion?
The inquiry that was conducted investigated any possible sources of contamination. Soil, grass samples were taken. Only trace amounts of any chemical substances were found. So our conclusion was that chemical poisoning was not the cause.
But some experts believe that the inquiry's findings may have been flawed.
We understand that the tests were carried out over a day after the incident, so a lot of the pesticide could have drifted away from the site and dissipated and therefore not shown up in those results.
Although the doctors didn't find the cause, most people reported the same symptoms: sickness, fainting and a metallic taste, which could suggest a different explanation.
The interesting thing for me was that there was a microwave transmitter a few hundred meters away. The symptoms being reported by the children were identical to studies reporting what happens when you get exposed to microwaves. And because of that, the authorities have since then changed the rules about the limits for microwave exposure. And all of these things together point, for me at any rate, to the involvement of microwaves in this incident.
Although it's almost 20 years since the disturbing event, for people who were at the Hollingwell show, memories of what happened are still as clear today as they were then. But why it happened still remains a mystery.
Everyone has their theories, and I don't think we'll ever find out what happened that day. But whenever I drive by there, it's like a shiver go down my spine. It's really odd.
Our next story is about one man's horrifying fight for survival after he was attacked by a shark in the Red Sea. The mystery is how he survived at all, because experts say that when a shark makes repeated attacks, it won't normally give up until its prey is dead.
For Martin Richardson, learning to dive had always been one of his greatest ambitions. So in 1996, he went on an organised diving holiday to one of the most beautiful places in the world, the Red Sea.
To see the crystal clear water, I've never experienced that before, and the coral, especially the colours of the fish, I mean, the really vibrant colours, and that was amazing to me.
I've got over 1,500 dives in the Red Sea, and every single dive still shows me something absolutely beautiful, whether I see a shark or a turtle or not. You can still see absolutely beautiful things. It's paradise.
After a wonderful day spent swimming along the coral reef, Martin and the other divers headed back to the boat.
We were all on the back deck, and then we saw a couple of dolphins. They were jumping out of the water. They were friendly with the boat. They were swimming, you know, close to the boat. So let's jump in, let's go swim with them, let's play with them. So that's what we did. Well, when I first jumped in, I didn't see any of the dolphins at all. They had pretty much left. So I just rolled over on my back and then just lay there, just kicking my arms and legs. You're thinking of all your friends at work. They're all working away hard, and there's you laying in the middle of the Red Sea with the beautiful blue skies. It's just peaceful.
Yeah, fine, still out there.
Oh yeah, he's splashing around there.
Drink? Yeah, sure, why not? I think I see him.
I felt the thud underneath me, on my back. And then the tranquility just went to mass confusion and panic. That's when I realized what it was, what was happening. The grim fact that I was being attacked by a shark.
Hi, I'm on, how you doing?
And I started, like I said, Tony, look at this, look, he's shouting shark, and it's obviously a dolphin's playing with him or something. And then within 3 seconds, literally, of thinking that, I thought, no, he's not shouting for the fun of it. He's getting attacked by a shark.
My biggest fear with seeing that much blood in the water was a feeding frenzy.
I jumped down into the Zodiac while I was watching this going on. I thought, oh my God, he is getting attacked by a shark.
And then it was just a natural instinct to punch it, which I did. Just punched it straight on the top of its head. Didn't do a lot of good because it went away, it came back and got me again.
I suppose you could like compare it to watching your best friend in the street and seeing a bus coming behind him, and you know it's going to hit him and there's nothing you can do about it.
This thing just keeps coming back, hitting you, hitting you, hitting you, and then hitting you again, then it goes away, and then you're just waiting for that last final bite just to finish you off.
Like, I didn't give a monkey's about the shark. I wanted to get him out, you know. I'd have pulled him from the jaws if needs be. You're that hyped up.
This is the point where I actually gave up, knowing, you know, that I was dead.
The strangest thing was, the last quarter of the journey, everything went surreally calm compared to what had been going on. From Martin thrashing around and screaming in the water to all of a sudden he seemed to have been left alone. And it was at this point that I saw a dolphin fin come shooting past his head. I come up close to Martin, so I mean the boat was basically floating in this like huge pool of like, you know, it was the Red Sea. By looking at him, I don't know any way that he could have survived it, to tell you the truth. He was just ripped to pieces. It had him like a rag doll.
Martin's torso had been so badly bitten that he'd lost over 3 pints of blood.
I threw them the rope from the front of my boat, and they tied on, and they just went hell for leather back for port.
You're gonna have to get him out of here.
In hospital, he was given over 200 stitches.
A shark had been stopped in its tracks of a completely vicious, unprovoked attack on a human where it was dining out. And it had been stopped in its tracks for no reason at all by a dolphin.
But could a dolphin really have stopped the shark from killing Martin?
I do think that Martin was saved by the dolphin, and it's not a unique story. There are lots of other stories from all over the world of people that claim that their lives were saved by dolphins from shark attack.
But some experts believe there may be another reason why the shark broke off from such a frenzied attack. Martin may indeed have saved his own life.
It could have been Martin's actions if he fought and struggled violently enough that scared the shark away, because sharks are very sensitive in the nose. They have electrical sensors. Hitting them on the end of the nose, hitting them around the head, going for delicate parts like their eyes, you know, that might actually dissuade the shark from making a full attack. Is actually, well, for want of a better expression, bitten off more than it can chew because you're fighting back so violently. So certainly hitting and kicking might actually scare the shark off and dissuade it from making a full attack.
I personally believe that the dolphin recognised Martin's distress, that it knew that he was a human and not a dolphin, and went to his aid at the dolphin's own personal risk. Often when there are groups of people in the water with wild dolphins, they will single out and seek someone who may be distressed or ill in some way. So there's quite a lot of evidence that dolphins really are aware of human emotions as well as their own. I think it's one of the many mysteries that surround dolphins.
Whether the dolphin had come to save him or whether it was just acting on natural instincts. I mean, either way, it was there and it saved his life. I don't have a doubt about that in my mind, but you think to yourself, why was it there for him? What's the reason behind it?
Whether they were protecting me, I don't know, but I do know that shark had no reason to stop attacking me. I'd given up. I knew I was dead. I was just waiting for the last bite, and it never came back. So I believe that the dolphins did save me.
That's all for this week. On our next programme, he saved more people than Schindler, but why did Raoul Wallenberg disappear? What pulled this woman from the clutches of death? And how did a kidney transplant change a patient's whole personality? Until then, from Mysteries, goodbye.
And that's at the earlier time of 8 o'clock in a week's time on BBC One.